Brought to you by Infineon. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jouar, and today is March 27th, 2024. And I've got Ray Notarantonio here with me of Infineon. Hi, Ray. How are you?
I'm doing great, Miriam. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I want to talk with you about software-defined vehicles. It's a big buzzword, but it's not, because it's actually a really cool thing. It's kind of bringing the cars, especially the EVs, which are primarily what SUVs are about these days, into the smartphone and tablet world, right?
It is, although I do think a car is a tad more
Of
complicated than a
course.
smartphone and tablet, but yes. And we're also seeing, these SDV architectures rolling out on ICE vehicles as well.
No, absolutely. But it's a little different because I feel like there's a better opportunity for integration with EVs, right? It's just obviously, we've been doing computers on ICs forever, right? ECUs are a thing, but my gut feeling is that as we're moving forward, there's a lot of commonality with the kind of functionality the end consumer touches, right?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I definitely agree with that, and I would just add to the fact that that EVs are definitely a growing segment, and so a lot of people want to try to figure out how do we cost optimize those and how do we get those better prepared for the market. So
oh yeah,
definitely
and that's
SDV fits.
definitely a big conversation. Before we start, you and I just talked about this a little before the podcast. I want to kind of walk the audience through, what's going on here, how things have been different. Infineon, you make chips and semiconductors that end up at a very low level in vehicles, right? We're talking motor controllers, we're talking inverters, we're talking, essentially even like down to the MOSFET level or, the GaN level of the chips, right? And of course you make some higher level chips, you make communication chips like Wi-Fi chips and stuff like
Yep.
that too. So you have a pretty broad portfolio, but unlike say NVIDIA or MediaTek or Qualcomm, you don't make application processors, right?
We do not make application processors. We're implementing some elements of parallel processing units into our next generation controllers to enable machine learning, but certainly not at the level of what you're going to see in some of those other guys that you've mentioned.
Right. So with that in mind, I'd like to kind of explain to the audience where Infineon fits in, and of course that starts with the big change that's been happening. And the reason I made the analogy between smartphones and tablets and cars today, especially EVs, is that this big change in the way cars are being manufactured, right? Like right now, well, still, but it's changing rapidly. OEMs, the car makers, the car brands, we're all familiar with, they, hire these first tier suppliers to, basically make the most important parts. In the past, the radio in your car was a single unit, right? That was not very tightly integrated in the vehicle. Like GM had a whole division called Delco that did this back in the day for their cars, for example, right? So that was kind of the model. And because of that, the OEM were dealing with black boxes, right? And so they didn't really know what was going on. And you guys, Infineon, would work with these tier one, first tier basically suppliers and help them create these products for the OEMs. But what's happening now is, with everything being connected, everything being very software driven, and Tesla has kind of shown us the way here, and at least in the West, China's doing it as well, quite aggressively. But basically, it's ideally you don't want, like in a phone, you don't want the radio to be owned by a completely different player than the application processor. You want them to collaborate at least. Sure, for example, Apple uses Qualcomm chips for their modems, but they use their own chipsets for their AP. But they work together, and the software is owned by Apple. And that's kind of the key here. So, Tesla wants to own the entire software down to that little microcontroller in your seats, right? That moves the seat around, right? So you guys are playing down in that little microcontroller, and of course in other bigger parts before that. But until now, the car makers didn't have control over that. So what Infineon makes possible today by working, with the tier one manufacturers towards what the OEMs want is give the OEM the opportunity to create this better experience for consumers by making this vertically integrated software platform. And so for you guys, it's been a big change. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how Infineon fits into this and where you think we're going, because obviously it's never going to stop. Like, where are we going from here? And
Yeah.
how do you fit in with the big players, the ones that provide the ADAS computers and the, infotainment system application processors?
Right. Very good questions, Miriam. And one thing and you touched on this, that the radio was a black box. And if you really look at how automotive electronics evolved, right, it has been a very slow evolution, if you will, right? What we're experiencing now, and I think some CEOs have said we're going to have, 50 years of innovation over the next 5 or 10 years, right? That level is going to get crammed in. So speed is going to be critical. But I think when you look back, the OEMs were like, their position was, I need to add this feature. I add this box. I add this feature. I add this box. Oh, I want to have a radio. Well, now I have a radio. Oh, I want to have a seat controller. Well, now I need to go get a seat module. And this led to this proliferation of 100 ECUs.
Right. And the
And,
communication network to accommodate them all. The wiring, which is heavy, and all the challenges of making that sync together.
And 100 million lines of code, right? That
Yes.
that quite frankly, maybe only 10 million lines of code are active, but because of all the legacy pieces, right? You have all that. So, that's the history. And I think, and you pointed out, Tesla, I think with Model 3 kind of showed people it doesn't have to be done that way. And a lot of people started to come up with their own ideas about how to implement it. Some people moved towards, hey, let's at least try to do software over the air updates on a few key modules, right? Help reduce warranty cost, help improve customer satisfaction. And many OEMs started to do that. That seemed to work pretty well. And now I think the other position is, geez, we have continued now more and more hardware proliferation. We want to have more features. We also see a market that maybe the car market volume is not going to continue to grow unabated, right?
Mhm.
There is this sense that the car market volumes are not going to grow as much.
Right.
So these guys got to figure out, well, how do we monetize? How do we generate, streams of revenue continuously, not just selling a car, right? So, how can we sell features? How can we sell subscriptions? How can we add these other features, and basically give consumers the opportunity? Oh, you want heated seats? Well, here's a subscription for that. And I'm shocked, right?
That is a bad example, though. That's upsetting a lot of people.
I mentioned that just for that reason, because I actually have friends who have said, I don't even have heated seats anymore because I don't want to pay the subscription, right?
Oh, wow.
Or I don't have passive entry to my vehicle anymore because I don't want to pay the subscription.
Right.
So it's so maybe there's overreach there, but all of these things have led to the OEM saying that, hey, I got to be the master of my own domain. I got to
Right.
bring this stuff in house.
Mm-hmm.
And this 100 million lines of code, I can't manage it. I got to figure out a new way to do this, right? So the big application processor guys are coming in. They're seeing those great opportunities. For us, we see them as partners in two different ways. One way, we're functionally safety experts in the sense that we make microcontrollers that work in braking, ADAS, powertrain applications where you need ASIL D rated systems. The application processors, they don't do that. Our part sits next to their device and provides this ASIL D type of functionality to give that level of safety feature at the system level, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's one piece. Our other partnership is on memory. We have a big memory division. You didn't mention memory, but we do make memory.
You're right.
No,
Infineon memory.
We do make memory devices, and we partner with the SoC suppliers in optimizing how our memory works with their SoC, whether it's in a secure boot mode or in a high data rate configuration. So they're our partners. The SoC guys are our partners, definitely. And all of them that you've mentioned are people that we work with.
Great. So, you touched on a few things that I think are really interesting here. The first one is, you talked about security and you talked about reliability, and I'm talking like mission critical reliability, not the, will my car work in 10 years? That's obviously important. But as you said, braking controller, there's no potential fault possible here, right? It has to work. So I think it's interesting because, in what I'm seeing is this smartphone tablet world that's coming in with these AP companies like Qualcomm, MediaTek, NVIDIA, and the young startups like well, startup maybe not anymore, but Tesla, and Rivian and so on. And they're bringing all their software chops, all the stuff we're used to in consumer electronics, all this really great experience-based stuff, the stuff you touch on the screens and you experience when you're driving, the great music systems, the great mapping technologies, the nice thing about having OTA software update, as you said, for which is beneficial to everyone. But they are not quite as good with the security and the reliability stuff. I think security they've got, but not at kind of like an airplane level, critical level. Like the aerospace industry is a good example of like redundancy and stuff like that. And I think this is where Infineon comes in, right? You guys are able to kind of teach them how to do this right, and yet accommodate their needs for these mission critical parts. I think that's a big part of the story that nobody talks about, right?
Yeah.
Because as you said, I was simplifying it when I said tablets and smartphones. There's way more to it than that, right?
Absolutely.
But overall, from a consumer perspective, you don't think about, is my brake controller going to work, right? Like it's just going to work. Whereas, if you don't connect to the internet for a second with your Instagram app, it's fine. You'll be okay.
Exactly. I think that type of deterministic operation is very critical for safety systems. And I mean, we joke about this all the time, right? That nobody wants to be heading, going 70 miles an hour down the road and having to, press the reboot button, right? These systems have to work under all sorts of different conditions. And I think the topic of Tesla, they've been in the news quite a bit. I mean, regarding some of the ways that they've handled some of their systems. But those guys are learning. They're excellent. These guys are really experts in their field, no question. I think for us at Infineon, we know how to make safety systems reliable, and we know how to make security systems. Right. For instance,
Yeah.
I don't know. A lot of people don't know this. Our chip goes in the U.S. passport.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that the
Yes.
biometric chip was yours. Cool.
Our chip goes into your Visa card, right? When you tap, that's our chip in there. So we have deep technical expertise in cryptography and all sorts of ciphers and those types of skills that you need to make a software defined vehicle secure. Because really, if you don't have a secure vehicle, it can't be safe.
Right.
At the end of the day.
No, that's actually very important too. The other thing I think you touched on, which I thought was really interesting, is kind of like the topology of the car, the way the devices are interconnected. First, there's less boxes now, and because the APs can take a lot of the heavy lifting, and some stuff's not mission critical. As like it's fine if the heating and AC system doesn't react for some reason instantly to your wishes. You'll be fine. The brakes have to work though, right?
Yeah.
So there are different levels of priorities here. And I think that it's interesting how the networking and the cabling, like I think I wrote an article for Tech Radar. I write about cars for Tech Radar and do a bi-weekly column or so about the technology trends in cars. And I talked about the Cybertruck, right? I mean, like it or not, Tesla or not, all the things that surround that or not, you have to look at it from a technical perspective as a very interesting product. The 48 volt architecture, which is a full-on one, not just a partial one for certain components like we've seen before. The networking topology, they're using a gigabit Ethernet token ring type network. That's a loop, and you can cut it once without any loss of data or any latency issues. The fact that they're using that Ethernet network to carry not just mission critical data to the braking system, for example, the steer-by-wire that they have, but they actually use it to carry audio from the microphone to the AP and audio from the infotainment to the speaker system. The speakers actually have sequential and Ethernet connector instead of an actual like speaker terminal on them, right? Things like that to me are really fascinating, and they're able to save a lot of weight and complexity in the manufacturing and the design by having thinner cable for 48 volt and lesser cabling in the car. And I think this is an area where you guys excel, right? You create these controllers, these Ethernet, essentially endpoints for these boxes, right?
Yeah, I think this is going to be something that's going to really proliferate. I mean, we already see Ethernet. Everybody's working on it. You mentioned 1 gig. People are even working on
higher,
even higher, right? 20 gig, if you will. And one of those reasons is to really try to do more real-time control centrally, right? By
Right.
having that kind of what we would call like a fast loop and a slow loop, if you will, right? The slow
Exactly.
loop is going to be way out on the edge. The fast loop is going to be these other system protocols, and and so I think the other thing you're going to start to see is 10 base, is Ethernet 10 base T1S moving out into the edge nodes and probably, most likely replacing CAN.
Oh yeah, I
And,
mean, CAN
you
is
know,
too slow now.
yeah, I mean, even though you can make CAN with higher speeds now, if you will, they can get up to 810 meg and they can have a higher payload. Um, Ethernet now has solved the issue of point to point, right? You can have multi drop with 10 base Ethernet 1S, and I do think the advantage there is that an OEM now from a software stack can write something from the cloud all the way to the edge node, right? Because they
Yeah.
can have they
Yeah.
can have a seamless IP address integration. And again, if you want to be the OEM that wants to own all your software, isn't that how you would do it? Right. And I
Yeah,
think
and
that's the big changing thing is the OEMs wanting to own their software. And as a result of that, they have to dabble in the hardware a bit. And this is, I think, where the tricky part comes in.
and that's where you guys come in, I think,
That is where we
ultimately.
come in. That is exactly where we come in. And you mentioned it. We do see with the software defined vehicles that they want to have a higher level of integration, right? They want to have these bigger boxes. They want to have a higher level of integration. But why? Because today they've got 80, 100 ECUs. Can they get down to 20? Go
Right.
take a look at a Model 3. I think
Yeah.
there's like 22 ECUs in there, right?
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah, go take a look at
They
a
don't have
Ford.
fuses either anymore. They use,
No,
resettable electric,
yeah,
systems, which are
yeah.
great.
And those are a lot of our what we would call our smart power technology. They use quite a bit of, which is basically allowing people to develop a more dependable, reliable systems because fuses are not that reliable. And the other thing with fuses, they have to be placed in an area where that is serviceable. You have to
Right.
be able to physically get to it, right? And so, you need a fuse box just like you have a breaker box in your house. You have to physically get to it. Now with our technology, and this is in our smart power domain, um, they can package these solutions anywhere in the car. And accessible space in a car is premium space.
Yep.
And so trying to get rid of those fuse and relay boxes is a big benefit. And you're right, they don't have any of those left in their systems anymore. And you're going to start to see this in this next generation of OEM software defined vehicles. They want that ability to be able to have a dependable power network, to be able to control power, to be able to like power up certain systems when the car is in the garage or in a parking lot to maybe turn on cameras. They want to have a lot more sophisticated power moding systems, right? And you need solid state smart solutions to do that, which is a
Yeah, and
big
the
area
power
for us.
management that you're talking about also matters for, like, for example, ADAS, right? Cameras, sensors
Yes,
are getting
absolutely.
real massive amounts of real time data, and on Cybertruck, this is all IP connected now. You no longer have any kind of like lower level protocol between the camera and the actual box it's connected to. It's just an IP stream that's encrypted and high speed, and same as the speakers, as I said before. And I think things like that for a lot of people, it's hard to kind of wrap your head around that. Like, usually on a PC, your camera is connected via USB. We're talking so much data coming in here that you can't really do that anymore. And then, conversely, as you were explaining, you have a lot more wiring to deal with when you have, basically all these separate modules to connect in daisy chain. Back in the day, when backup cameras were first installed, it was literally analog coax,
Yeah, exactly.
coming from the camera in the back to some sort of digitizer in a module somewhere under the dash, and all the loss of performance and quality that entail. Now it's basically a stream of data coming straight from the tailgate. So, we could go on forever like this, Ray, but we have to wrap up. What are a few final things you want us to talk about with regards to Infineon and software-defined vehicles?
Infineon is really investing heavily in this space across all of our portfolio, right? In the case of enhancing our security, our smart power. You mentioned 48 volts. It is something I think that's going to be a key enabler in the next few years to help people reduce their overall cost. At the end of the day, a
I agree.
software-defined vehicle is more hardware, right, than it is today. And that's, think of it as it's hardware in waiting, right? that the OEM wants to enable a feature. So with that additional hardware, the OEM's got to figure out ways to offset those costs. That's through integration. That's through reducing the number of modules with fewer wires, right? As you
Yeah.
pointed out. I mean,
And
a
weight,
wire,
right? Weight
yeah,
savings alone.
and weight savings. I mean, a harness is very heavy and like the second costly component in an ICE vehicle, right? Um, and Infineon is doing a lot in those areas to help with integration, help with real-time computing, help with security, and working with our partners and our OEMs. I think our biggest challenges are continued relationship developments with our OEMs directly because they're our customer's customer,
Right.
right? And now they're becoming our customer, which is, I think, one of maybe the biggest challenges that we have within the semiconductor industry as our customer landscape really evolves and changes.
Absolutely. But you know what? I think it's all very exciting, and I think it's going to make our vehicles and our experiences better. And I think it's going to be make the industry leaner and faster, which I think is something we all need right now, especially in this time of climate change and difficulties that we're facing with geopolitical stuff. So thanks for enlightening us on what Infineon's up to. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, Ray. We will have you on the show again. Thanks so much for being my guest.
Thanks, Marianne. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thanks. Take care.
And I'm back, folks, with Kate Kozuck. How are you doing, Kate?
Oh, I'm good. I'm excited to be talking with you today.
You know, I think we're going to talk about wearables a lot. Obviously, it's your beat, and I'm a big smartwatch, fangirl too. But before we do, we kind of have to talk about the elephant in the room. It landed right when I was recording with Ray last week, and it's like, oh my God. The United States Department of Justice suing Apple for a whole bunch of things. Some of it is very interesting because it does relate to smartwatches, and I really kind of want you to have your take on that. And basically, by this point, a week later, lots of opinions have been thrown around, and lots of people have said things. My take is, I'm not a big government intervention regulation person, but having grown up in Europe and also being a dual citizen of Canada, I'm actually a triple citizen. I have a French citizenship. So I have European citizenship, Canadian citizenship, French and US citizenship. So having lived in Canada and Europe, it's nice when the government says to big companies, hey, look, you're going too far. You're being a monopoly or you're being greedy, like stop being a jerk, right? That's something that we don't have in the US. And I understand why, but at the same time, because where do you with a slippery slope, innovation can go away when you have too much regulation. I get that. But I think my biggest fear and my biggest concern is that Apple has done some things that are really, really anti-competitive. And a lot of people don't see it. I've seen a lot of media defend Apple, and it's surprising to me because I'm like, okay, look, I know you're afraid you're not going to get the next iPhone on the next news cycle when it comes out in September, and you don't want to piss off Apple. But look, I'm only an Apple user insofar that I've been a long-time Mac user. I have an iPhone, of course. I use it for video recording because the quality is awesome. My spouse is all in on Apple. I'm an Android user. We have a perfectly happy 20-year marriage despite being completely different platforms. Surprise, it's possible.
Defying the odds.
I know. So my point is that I feel like this whole iMessage thing is a problem. And people are like, what do you mean? You can install WhatsApp. Like, I agree with that because my mom uses WhatsApp. I talk to her on WhatsApp. If she had an iPhone, she'd be on WhatsApp too. The problem is you look at, teenagers, young people, they're so influenced and it's really becoming an issue. And all Apple has to do is make iMessage for Android. That's all they have to do. We're not even asking them to change it. Like RCS is not going to solve the problem because we're still going to have the bubble. So that's one thing that I'm really pissed off about with Apple. And then the other thing I'm pissed off with Apple is, some of the things you're going to talk about in a second, which is like, you can't use an Apple Watch with an Android phone. You can't use a Samsung Watch or Wear OS watch, or most watches with an iPhone. You could. Some watches that support Huawei did it for a while. Samsung did it in the Tyson days. But it's very hard because I saw this at Pebble when I worked there. We had access to APIs in iOS that let us integrate Pebble with Apple. In fact, Apple's integration with Pebble was better than Android's integration because Apple made all this really cool stuff available for us to make it work with the iPhone. But then when they launched the Apple Watch, they cut that off. And so these are the kind of things that I have issues with. I don't think it's a monopoly. I think that they're doing some things that are anti-competitive in the messaging realm and in the smartwatch realm and in the accessory realm. Like when I talk to a young person, Kate, that tells me, wait, I can use my AirPods with an Android phone. That's how brainwashed people are. Right? Yes, it's not going to be as good of an experience. But there again, why isn't it as good of an experience? Because Apple doesn't have an app to support firmware updates, settings, and stuff for Android on. And you're going to say, well, why should a lot of people like that are really hardcore capitalists are telling me, well, why should they? And I'm like, well, why not? It's a gateway drug to Apple. Like that's a legitimate way to getting people to come into buying an iPhone later. If you maybe do it slightly better, give more features. I get that. That's fine. But like, I don't know. What's your take on all this madness?
Well, first off, I think that anyone who's listening who hasn't yet actually taken a look at the lawsuit for themselves, I recommend it. It's pretty digestible, actually. They don't use too much like lawyer speak. It's actually
jargon.
No, not at all. And I had to take a look at it myself to really formulate some thoughts. I'm also in the Apple ecosystem, and I've been a little brainwashed to feel that the walled garden pays off if you follow the rules and are a good girl and then get what you're supposed to get. So yeah, when I first heard of the suit, I rolled my eyes maybe a little bit. Like, okay, I think all companies do have the right to make their products work the best with their own other products. But again, I looked a little bit closer at the suit, and I gotta say, the DOJ makes a very interesting case. It kind of makes you think that there are a few places where Apple has crossed a line. I think you could very much draw a line down the middle and put some of the different complaints in different camps of like, this is cool, this isn't so cool. I think the argument on third-party smartwatches, quote unquote, not working with iPhones. Some people are going to say, okay, yeah, that shouldn't be the case. But I actually happen to think that that's not too big of an issue. I've used a ton of third-party smartwatches with my iPhone. You're talking about Fitbit, Garmin, but it's not even just like smartwatches anymore. Fitness trackers, smart rings, like there's all types of fitness and connected accessories from third-party brands that do, in fact, work quite well with iPhone. And I think that's totally fine. I don't think someone should go out and buy an iPhone and be like, dang, I wish I could have a Samsung watch or a Pixel watch.
Yeah, I think those are more extreme cases. I kind of feel like personally, I think the Apple Watch is the best smartwatch. Like, honestly, like objectively, I think it's the best smartwatch. But today, I think I don't have the same breadth, I should say, of experience that you have. But the second thing is, I do think there's room for fitness bands. And I'm not talking about Fitbit even. I'm talking about the cheap Xiaomi you can buy at Walmart for $30. And that should work with your Apple Watch. Because look, all you need is your step count. All you need is to wear something at night that gives you your sleep automatically without having to do any kind of weird. Apple's trying to like force you into sleeping certain hours, all that stuff. No, like I want to go to bed when I go to bed, and I don't even have to do anything. I wanted to detect that I'm sleeping, start counting my sleep, start monitoring my breath, my heart rate, all that, and turn off my turn off my notification, turn on my do not disturb automatically.
You would hate the Aura Ring.
Like, really? Because it tries to regulate. No. See, I'm 55 years old. I know how to freaking sleep, Kate. Like, I don't need some baby to monitor me on sleeping. I need to be able to get my sleep count mostly. And for that, I need a device that I don't even think about. That's why I think the smart bands have a lot of benefits there. But I could be ranting about that forever.
There are some bigger implications though when we're talking about this. Like TV manufacturers haven't gotten in trouble yet for having certain audio features that only work when you buy one of the brand soundbars.
It's true.
And now when you go to the Best Buys and Walmarts and you look at the TVs, they're all displayed with the brand's soundbar. So of course people are going to be kind of guided to make those purchases. And I could argue that in a lot of ways that makes things easier and more streamlined for customers. If I was someone that had no idea what I was buying, if I could go into a store and be like, I'm going to get this, this, this. It's the same thing when I go into like a Lululemon. Like I know like I need a workout outfit. I can get everything I need right there. It's all in the 100%. Same brand. So I'm just very curious to see. Now, if we're going to talk about some of the stuff that I think has crossed the line, limiting the availability and functionality of certain apps, and of course the RCS controversy, I think that there are things here that when the general public, if they actually read this and see kind of what these practices are, I'm going to think that they'll be pretty miffed if they read it the way that it's been presented.
Yeah. I think the problem I have with Apple is that look, I have experienced my spouse, for example, as well, what could be by integrating all Apple, right? Like my spouse has an Apple Watch, an iPhone, and a MacBook, right? They don't have an iPad. They don't have AirPods either. They use a third party, I think Samsung Buds with their iPhone. Just because, I have all these devices for free. Like we weren't going to spend $250 on a pair of AirPods. Well, when they only use them with their phone. They never switch devices. So it was just easier to use like, oh, look, I got some Samsung Buds Pro 2 or something here. Let's just do that. You get noise canceling. They're very happy with it. But here's the thing, right? The thing is, even they are like, I do not like this full integration Apple is doing. I don't want my text messages on my Mac. So we turned off continuity. We turned off... Like they're like, when I'm on my Mac, I want to do Mac things. I don't want to have my entire phone accessible on my Mac. And some people are completely the opposite. They want that. They like that seamless, complete interplay of the platform. But I think for older people, especially, who are kind of used like my computer is my computer, my phone's my phone, my watch is my watch. Some integration is very critical, right? Of course, you want your watch to keep track of your sleep and your vitals and send it to your watch because your watch has the app and it can then send it to the cloud if you don't have a connected 4G watch. All that stuff makes a lot of sense. But I think that beyond that, like I know some Apple users who just are not on board with like the new Apple way of everything being magically working together, because the problem they have is that they no longer have control. They don't understand how it actually works together. Like one time my spouse came up to me completely fumingly mad, said, I cannot believe what's happening here. I get to my Mac every other day and do not disturb is on. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. They're like, I didn't turn it on. I'm like, did you turn it on your phone by any chance? See what I'm saying? Like to you, this is like, of course I want that feature because I'm so used to that. But to a lot of Apple users, but to them, it was like, no, why should my Mac go and do not disturb? My Mac is a different entity. It's a different device. And I think for me as an Android user and a Mac user, I have like my Mac is just essentially a bunch of Apple apps. Of course, I've got Final Cut Pro because I do video editing, and I've got open source. Like I edit all my audio with Audacity, which is an open source audio editor. I use Affinity, which was just bought by Canva this week, by the way. Mm-hmm. Affinity is one of the few Photoshop competitors that's still not subscription based, and I do it on purpose, and it's Mac only, and it's really good. So I use that for photo editing, and of course but I don't use Mail. I don't use Calendar. Like I just use a web browser. In fact, my main web browser on my Mac is, cringe, are you guys ready? Firefox. Because it's cross-platform, because my entire profile can move. If I review a PC that I'm using, like right now, I'm reviewing some new Dell, I have my entire web browsing is on the same platform. Chrome, unfortunately, is just the same. I can do Chrome, but Chrome is a battery killer on Mac. So. Yep. So Firefox is much more efficient. Safari would be the solution because it's the most battery efficient. But the problem is Safari is like siloing me in. So to me, see this, I don't even use this ecosystem advantage. And if Apple takes that away from me, honestly, I'm going to leave the Mac platform. For me, that is why I love a Mac. I love a Mac because the hardware is absolutely gorgeous. The software is simple. It doesn't make me lose time cycles trying to customize it, because I'm like, it's the way it is. Like on a Windows PC, I'm always like, I could adjust this font size and do something, and so I'm ADD, so it's really easy for me to go down the rabbit hole, right? So with the Mac, it's simple, it works, and most importantly, it runs Unix in the back end. So I'm an old Unix person. Like I don't want to use Linux because Linux doesn't work very well on most hardware. So I've got the best of every world, but I don't take away my agency. I want control on my Mac. I don't want to use your Apple apps.
Right. So my Mac is so good because I'm an Android user. If you haven't written that op-ed yet, you absolutely should.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Yeah. But look, I mean, it's not necessarily better. It's just a different experience, and it's a different set of priorities, right? Like I totally respect people who are all in on Apple. It's a delightful experience. But to me, as a longtime tech person, it feels like I'm in jail. Like I have no control of what my devices are working harmoniously, yes, but I feel like my agency was taken away from me. I feel like I have to walk by the Apple way of thinking and doing. And I'm not sure I'm up for that. And maybe it's because I'm older, but I also think that young people today don't have the opportunity to make up their own minds about the technology they're going to use.
There's a metaphor
Because
in there.
they're forced by their peers. Peer pressure is a real deal for young people. They're forced by their peers to go the way the path of least resistance. And if you look, the path of least resistance right now is absolutely iMessage for most people. But you can't get that on Android. And to me, if you don't have the budget to buy an iPhone SE for $499 and you can only afford a OnePlus Nord, 30, whatever it's called, N30 for $250 at T-Mobile, why should you be penalized for that?
100%. Have you seen that now there's like a trend where it's considered a red flag if someone you're going on a date with has green bubbles for texting?
I know.
Like, that's so mean.
I mean, how do you feel about this? How about, you're obviously younger than me, so like, do you feel that pressure? Like, I don't know if you're dating or whatever. Like, do you hear that amongst your own peers even?
In my circle, 95% of people have an iPhone, and
Wow.
it's like the one or few friends that don't are always the group chat killers. Like, it's so mean. Now we're older a little bit, so we understand that like everyone has the right to make their own choices, and I've preached in my circles that you have to respect that adults know what's best for them and not to peer pressure them into doing some things and buying things that they don't want to own. But in general, having better compatibility between the platforms I found to be more of an issue as I make friends more and more that are international and do have a lot more variety in their smartphone and platform choices, and being able to communicate with them just all that much smoother through messages would be a good thing for everyone. Like that, we're going to see that come down. If one thing comes out of this and it's that, I think this would have been a success.
Yeah, no, if I was king, as it were, or queen, more likely queen, to be honest with you, I would say Apple make an iMessage for Android. Look, it doesn't have to have every feature. Obviously, it's not going to have like the Memoji or whatever they call them on Apple, right? Like that stuff that requires to have the Face ID scanner to scan your face and all that. I get that. But at least give us the basics. High resolution photos and videos, read receipts, blue bubbles, the whole thing, right? So, or give us that equivalency with RCS. If you don't want to do, like, at least make it so that if I'm on RCS, I appear as a blue bubble and we're more or less equal, right?
Right.
Like, I'll give you an example on how bad it is. The other day, my spouse texted me from their iPhone to my Android phone. I have a Pixel 8 Pro, latest software update. I'm on T-Mobile, supported carrier. They sent me a text. It never arrived. I cannot find it anywhere. Every now and then this happens. And it's like, I've never been on an iPhone, so I know it's not like I have to deregister an old iPhone somewhere or something. It's like, it just doesn't work. But who do you blame here? It could be a Pixel bug, of course. Google's full of bugs. It could be a T-Mobile problem. Who knows? Like, you experience this once. Of course, you go out and buy an iPhone to talk to your spouse. You know what I'm saying? Because you're like, this is mission critical. I can't miss a text message.
It's true. It's true. Yeah, you shouldn't be forced to change your device just to be able to communicate with one another. I feel like that breaks down the fundamental purpose of smartphones and like what we're even able to do now through mobile carriers. Like I in some ways I wish the mobile carriers were able to take a bit of a stronger stance against all this too, because it impacts them as well.
Yeah, I think that could work. That could be a thing. But, we've tried really hard to wean ourselves away from carriers having control of our phones, starting with the iPhone in 2007. And it did change the landscape for the better because, I was around reviewing phones before that. And man, and even into that, like even it took till about 2010, 2011 before we stopped seeing different versions of Samsung Galaxy on different carriers.
Well, yeah.
You remember that?
That was...
Anyway, so, let's talk about the smartwatch aspect or the wearable aspect of this Apple DOJ. And then that can be a good transition to talk about smart rings and my experience with the Xiaomi Watch. For those of you who don't know, I mention video sometimes. And, I have a Patreon that gives you an exclusive video version of the podcast. You can get in advance of the audio. So if you want to see us interact and show devices, and you have $5 a month to spare, That's the way to go. I just changed the pricing, so hopefully some more of you will join the Patreon, and you can see us on video in advance every week instead of waiting for the free audio version. So consider that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on DOJ versus Apple when it comes to wearables then?
Touched on this a little bit before, but I think that preventing true third-party wearable devices from not having access to apps, not being notification compatible, that's just, it's not right. And we've seen some of the coolest wearable features come from brands that aren't, Apple and Samsung and Google. There are these companies that actually specialize in wearables, in fitness, and
like
they're
Garmin.
developing. Garmin's a great example of that. We'll talk about it in a sec, but Oura Ring, they've done some really amazing stuff in the wearable market. It's kind of changed the minds of a lot of people of what a fitness tracker needs to work and look like. And luckily, in my experience, I've never had an issue with anything Oura related. But I also think that Oura is one of those companies that plays by Apple's rules as needed to make it work in their advantage. For example, they have an Apple Watch complication now, so they say, hey, don't ditch your Apple Watch for an Oura Ring. Let's actually make this work for both of us, and you can see your step count from your Oura Ring on your Apple Watch, because there still isn't a complication on your Apple Watch that lets you look at your step count on your home screen. But that's, as more and more smartwatches and smart wearables come out, it's in Apple's best interest to play nice with them. Again, I don't think that someone with a Galaxy Watch should feel that they're missing out, or Pixel Watch. Like, I believe in staying in the lanes. The OnePlus Watch was so exciting too. The OnePlus Watch 2 that just came out, I should say.
It's awesome, isn't it?
It's awesome. And now OnePlus users have that watch that has the same type of design language and the types of features and settings. It feels like it's reflective of the phone. And why wouldn't you want that as a user? I don't know. Like that seems
I get it. I totally get it. I think you're right. Like, to me, it's more like the devices that Apple doesn't have an equivalent product for, right? Like the Oura Ring, the simple fitness bands, right? Like, they should be better supported simply because Apple's not making one. And of course, here's the difficult thing, right? What if or when Apple makes a ring, which, inevitably, if Samsung is making one, is only a matter of, and they could do this in a heartbeat, right? Like,
I don't know why they haven't yet. Truly,
so then what happens to Oura? Because at Pebble, we know what happened to Pebble. How do you compete as a small company when the big juggernauts come for you?
Not only do they come for you, sometimes they'll throw you a check and say, hey, come.
And that's fair. That's actually more fair, to be honest with you, to be frank.
So I forget who I was talking to. I think it might have been an analyst about why Aura is so successful. And now we've seen it integrate with Apple, and we see that that's what people want. Would Apple in any world be able to go make a bid for Aura and actually bring them into the family? And apparently someone has spoken to Aura and said that that's really not what they're hoping for. They're proud of what they've built there, and they don't think that they're in a position where that's what they need to do yet.
And you know what?
Yet.
Eric Mijikovsky, our CEO back then, said the same thing.
Yep.
But he said it for too long, because eventually the valuation, Apple Watch came out and the valuation of the company was dropping, because people are like, why would we bother? And then it was too late. When they finally sold, they didn't sell for a lot of money. And I couldn't stay on that boat, right? Because I'm like, I'm the spokesperson. How can I be like, everything's great? We're in Titanic right now. I can do that. So I walked away. But look, I think it's interesting. I want to chat a little more in depth about the smart rings, because Samsung is obviously coming out with the ring soon. We saw it at MWC. It was introduced at the Unpacked event in January. We were all there. So what do you? This looks like they've learned from all the previous rings. They've really, like, this, to me, I'm very excited, especially if for some magical reason initially it does support the iPhone. So let's see. I doubt it, but I think Samsung being such a big player, if the price right, people are just going to go nuts for this thing, right?
Yeah. So Samsung is probably the most well-known company to come out with a device in this form factor ever. And I think we should back it up to like a little smart ring 101, because there actually aren't that many smart rings on the market. And of those that are, only few from ones that I've tested, some of my team at Tom's Guide have tested, there aren't very many good ones. So, you know,
okay, that's
think
good
about
to know. I'm like, I'm giving them more credit than is due here. Like,
Absolutely.
I'm like, they're great, aren't they?
Well, there's one that's quite great. So the idea is that, you know, maybe someone doesn't care to wear a smartwatch or their fitness tracker daily. Enter a smart ring. You know, this is a growing product category, and it offers pretty much the most low profile way to keep tabs on things like your sleep, your exercise, your recovery. Discretion is like the selling point. People want something that doesn't necessarily look like they're wearing tech. You know, they have these small little health sensors that are on the underbelly of them, and it's really meant to look like a piece of jewelry. You know, not to the point where I think people are replacing their wedding bands with them, but to the same point, you could just wear it, and unless someone really knows what they're looking for, like other Aura Ring users know when they see me wearing one and vice versa, but otherwise, it's so discreet. And the second benefit of it is battery life. They can last a lot longer than some of the smartwatches that are currently on the market. Right, they're just not powering it. Most of them you'll see are lasting between like 5 to even 7 days. So you get an unobtrusive design, multi-day battery life, so you can wear your smart ring 24/7, and that opens the door to a ton of in-depth wellness data that in some cases can really help people understand their health and their overall wellness better if they're reaching certain fitness goals. So let's talk about the Aura Ring specifically. They're the brand that's really doing this the best right now. They've had several years to build out their fitness suite. They introduce new features regularly, and some of the things that people like the most about the watch is that you can monitor your SpO2 and heart rate readings overnight to, you know, determine the quality of your rest, check out for things like sleep apnea. You can log lifestyle factors that could be impacting your sleep, but it can also track your movement and your calories and your steps in a way that isn't mid-workout. You're not looking at the display to be like, oh, how many seconds do I have to run more? It's more so like something that you can analyze after. It's a really good choice for people who maybe aren't like pro athletes, instead that they just really want to know overall, are they getting enough activity for their general days? There's some other features that are quite exciting, such as like stress management and menstrual cycle tracking, all that good stuff. Here, pregnancy prediction. I had a colleague whose Aura Ring helped her find out that she was pregnant. It was like, it's the most amazing story. And it's things like that where a smart ring starts to make a lot more sense, and you hear those types of things. Now, there are a few more on the market right now. There's something called the Ultra Human Ring. That's good. I would say that's probably like the step down if you're looking for something maybe a little bit more fitness focused. If you want to go really fitness focused, Amazfit, which also makes some budget fitness
I didn't know they had a ring. Wow, okay.
They have a ring. It's called the Helio. It was just announced this past CES. I think it's supposed to be shipping this spring. I probably should follow up with that. It's focused on true athletes and recovery. And when I asked them, I was like, is that really like what you're going for? Because Aura has had success with, you know, the more like lifestyle user. They're like, no, that's exactly it. Like, we're not going to try and get in on Aura's game. We're really going to go for the people who need as much insights as possible on their athletic recovery to know exactly how hard they should be pushing themselves. More in like that category of like the Whoop tracker, if you know what that is. It's like
no, I'm familiar with it. I didn't understand at first. My friends were all talking about their Whoop bands, and I'm like,
people
what are you talking about?
Whoop bands.
Like, are you talking about some kind of sex toy here or something? This sounds really weird. And then they showed me the thing, and I'm like, wait, what's the point of a strap? You already have a smartwatch on the other wrist. And they're like, you don't understand, it's the software. And I'm like, can't the software exist on my Apple Watch or something? Like, I get it because I've seen it now, like the data that it gathers. I kind of do wish it was an Apple Watch app. Like, you know, like the idea of wearing two wearables is, I mean, I'm not an exercise nut. Like all the people I know who have it are like, you know, kind of like really into tracking their health and fitness. And I don't totally understand that. It's like the Garmin guys, right? Like, or ladies. I'm like, look, I don't get it, but I'm not the one who climbs mountains. So you tell me, right?
You tell me what you want.
You go hiking.
Oh my
goodness. You need a Garmin. I get it.
So then this is what's really changing the game right now, and why people are so excited about the Galaxy Ring is that there really aren't many good alternatives to the Aura Ring right now, and there aren't
Any
so
big
many.
players either.
No, none even close to Samsung size. And I think that paired with the Galaxy Watch has, gotten better each and every year. They've put in a strong
I love mine.
emphasis. This past one, the Galaxy Watch 6, the big standout health upgrades that they were pushing was all about sleep, all about telling you how restful you are. You get these sleep profiles that compare how you sleep to an animal to come up with your, I think it's called a chronotype. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's very cute. Yeah.
Yeah. So Samsung Health has this, has all it needs in place. All the Ring is really going to do is introduce a new form factor. And as someone who wishes that there was such an Apple Ring to go with like my Apple Watch, I'm like, damn, this is making me really jealous. So did you get to take a look at it at MWC?
I did not have a briefing in person. I only got to see it behind the glass cases.
Same. No, I was there too. I was running up with the crowd. There were a lot of people taking photos.
I actually waited. I went towards the end of the event because I was writing a story that was a wrap-up article anyway. So it was like, I just can get my photos whenever. And so, yeah, I took some really nice shots. I used, my Pixel and got like nice zoomed close-ups, and it was great.
What do you think of how it looked? Like the design
I like how it's convex. I think it's going to be easier to put on and take off, having worn regular convex rings before, or whatever, concave, like when it's rounded on the inside. I think it's concave. Yeah, convex is out, concave is in. Anyway, like it looks really nice, and it looks packed with tech, which is, I've seen an Aura. It's also pretty amazing. Like, as an engineer turned journalist, I'm just like, oh wow, and it's like, it's impressive. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm excited about the idea of a ring because for a long time, when I was using an Android Wear device or even a device that had short battery life that was a smartwatch, like the Tizen watches back in the day from Samsung, and other like the earlier Wear OS watch that weren't very good with battery life, I would wear a fitness band at night on top of it. Like, I would swap. Like, I would take my watch off, put it on the charger, and I would grab a Huawei band back in the day when Huawei wasn't like a forbidden word, and it would track my sleep awesomely, and it would integrate with Google Fit awesomely, and I got my data. And all I did was wear the band to sleep. And so now a ring to sleep. I'm really into that, right?
So comfortable. That's a huge part of it. It's just having the amount of people I know with smartwatches who the one thing that they don't wear them for is sleep. Most users still do a nightly charge of their device and opt to not wear it to sleep because it's a bit uncomfortable, a bit distracting. Even the little lights from the sensors, people have said that like someone they share a bed with has complained about that. So
you're blinding me.
You can get so much more data on your health. I find that so exciting.
I think it's very, very appealing.
Can I tell you though, with the Galaxy Ring, this is what a lot of people I think haven't really put together yet. Samsung Health has remained a completely free platform. This is the day where every app and every service is a monthly fee,
Yes, that's true.
Fitness Plus is, from Apple costs this much. Fitbit Premium for Google costs this much. Samsung Health, $0 a month. It's great. Now, Aura Ring is $6 a month, $5.99 per month. And that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily realize. When they go to buy the ring, they're like, wait, now I have to pay for this? It's not something that's like really put there, but you really can't use the ring without it. It's you do need it. I've heard from Samsung. I spoke to one of their services execs over the summer when we were in Seoul for Unpacked.
Yeah, that was fun.
This is before we knew about a ring. This was just simply asking, like, we're, in the competition space, is there any plans to maybe introduce a subscription model? And they were like, hell no. Like, that's not something we want to do. We want this to be accessible to as much people as possible. They were, pointing as a reference to their Samsung TV Plus programming that they have on all the TVs, which is actually one of the most underrated features in the television space out there. I like a lot of TV stuff as well. So that could be something that really defines this emerging Galaxy Ring versus Aura Ring competition that's coming up. You know, how do you look to something that's like $6 a month for the rest of my life, or free for everything I need? Who knows how long that'll stay the case ultimately, because talk's talk. But
yeah, no, I agree, and that's also the challenge that we are in right now. Everything is so subscription based. It just becomes really expensive to do everything you want to do to just take care of yourself, you know. And let's move on to the watch real quick, because we have a lot of news items to cover, and it's been a really good comment. This watch, I don't know if you played with it.
I played with it a little bit at MWC. I love those swappable bezels.
Yeah,
for those on
I showed
video,
it last week. For those
it.
of you on Patreon, let me show you again. You can remove the bezel, and then there's different ones. If you put the bezel back on, it triggers an NFC tag that lets you pick the watch face that is optimal for that.
So you can do that. I wasn't
so
entirely
like just
sure.
to say, like I like it because they sent me also the bands that match the bezels, which is really cool. So yeah, look, it's this is one of what I call a kind of dumb smartwatch. I mean, it's or like a fitness band on steroid watch is what I like to call it. It's like essentially it's a fitness band. Battery life can be up to 10 days, 2 weeks or something like that. If you turn off the always on display, if you turn off continuous heart rate monitoring and all that. I've got all that turned on, and I'm running about 5 days with everything maxed. Like I'm every feature enabled, including always on display, because to me, I can't have a watch without an always on display. I'm old school. My watch is supposed to show me the time, even if it's just sitting on my desk. You know, I'm sorry. It's like, that's how I am. So I'm wasting battery. It's terrible, but 5 days is awesome. And, you know, all I need is notifications in a timely manner, filtered, right? Because I don't show all the stuff on my watch. I need, my basic vitals like heart rate, high heart rate variability, things like step count and floor count, all that basic stuff that you can get from just walking or running. Automatic health fitness detection, like where if I decide to go for a run, it figures it out and it does tracking. I don't know if this is a GPS because I'm not really a sporty person, but I might. And then basically, look, it's really rock solid. My favorite thing about a lot of these fitness bands from Xiaomi and Huawei and back in the day and like BBK Oppo, for example, it's like they are completely maintenance free. You charge them, you don't have to like go in the settings to turn on do not disturb. You don't have to like tell it I'm going to sleep. It's all completely automated and it's rock solid. Like I set my phone to do not disturb at night and it sets the watch to do not disturb. They're linked. That's a very Apple thing. It's normal, but I like the idea that I can just have a nap in the middle of the day, not think about it. The watch display goes to sleep because it's detecting I'm sleeping. And then it starts counting my sleep. Like it starts tracking. It doesn't matter when I sleep. Sure, it coaches me and says, hey, you've been going to bed late, or you've been waking up too early, or you're snoring, or you're doing whatever. But it doesn't actually like control when I should be doing what I want to do. And I like that. And they're all like that. And this is really just a fitness band and in a watch form factor. It doesn't have Google Maps. It has Alexa if you want an assistant, but nobody wants Alexa as an assistant. So
what are you calling this? Is a dumb smartwatch? Is that what we're calling it?
That's kind of rude. So I like to prefer calling it a fitness band on steroids.
Fitness band on steroids. That's some marketing right there. Are you swapping out the bezel
Not really.
at all?
I mean, I have I have 3 different bezels, 3 different bands, and every few days I swap them out. Sure. Ironically, in the last week, because I showed it last week with the same bezel, so obviously I've cycled through again. Although some of them are more like like have the numbers, like a bezel that has like kind of like a diver's watch. So this
cool.
one is like kind of like a totally plain one, but they have ones with like little numbers on it and stuff. They have leather bands. This is a silicone band, and so I don't even know the price of it, but the reality is, my take on this watch, and I think it's like maybe $200 or something or less, is it's great. It's great for the money. It's the right size for my wrist. It's a little bigger. It's not too thick. It's not too heavy. It's made of some kind of aluminum. I think the bezels are steel, so they protect the watch, but the actual watch itself is basic, just aluminum. So it makes it lightweight. What's a bit weird is that all the sensors in the back are red instead of green. Usually they're green, right? And so red when you notice it, you're like, whoa, that's weird. But it works just fine. But look, the reality is, I think for a lot of us here in North America who are so Apple Watch centric, these things exist and they're really cool. And I think that there is room for them. And I wish more people understood that, look, you don't need to have, like I do think the one thing I miss the most on these dumb smartwatches is a proper assistant. Like having, but here's the thing, it is a Bluetooth device to your phone, right? So you can take calls with it as a microphone and speaker. So technically, there's no reason that you couldn't push a button on the watch and it would activate Siri or Assistant. You know what I'm saying? They're just not doing that because there's too much latency, I think, with the Bluetooth and stuff. But in the same way as your car, you can do that. Just even if you don't use CarPlay or Android Auto, if you just have your phone paired with Bluetooth, you can hold the little chat button on the steering wheel and Siri responds, right? So I think they could do that. But Alexa is an option right now. You can sign in with Alexa through the Xiaomi app, and then you can get Alexa on your wrist on this thing. That's the only thing that I think would be improved. But I don't need apps. I don't need maps. I don't need any of that fancy, no, for me, it's like, I'm not running with my watch where I need to stream Spotify in 4G to my pair of earbuds. That's never going to happen. I'd rather bring my phone for that. So I think in that sense, it's a positive review, but it's a completely different mindset. If you remember the original OnePlus watch, everybody panned it. I wrote a good review because in my mind, it's like, if you understand what it is, a fitness band on steroids.
But the battery life.
Well, it did last, for me, it lasted like 3 or 4 days on a charge. And with all the features turned on and it was on display, kind of like this. So I'm like, the new one's bigger improvement because I still get best of both worlds, right? Which is really the great. I think this hybrid model is really the way to go, right?
I like it. The combination of like an RTOS and all that, it's nice. I just wish that instead of just being like aesthetic for the watch face, that it maybe like could actually open like certain apps or certain features. I don't know. But I guess that would defeat your purpose of it, why you even like the watch so much.
Yeah, I guess I like it simple. So, and some people, and you get, again, it's like the Garmin people who want like this particular thing. Like I need to be able to track my position on super accurately to an inch. I'm like, dude, I'm not arguing with you. Like get your Garmin watch, pay your $500. I'm cool with it.
To be clear, we're not hating on Garmin people.
No, not at all. Not at all. Jaime would kill me if I started hating on he would come and hunt me down. So, but look, we should switch to the news. There's a few items this week. It's mostly a rapid fire. The first thing is more of a public service announcement here, but it's a Worldwide Developer Conference. Apple's big conference is scheduled for June 10th, which is, see you there for those of you who are going to be there. So that's kind of cool, right?
Got my hotel room booked.
Oh, you're ready to go. Nice.
Oh, yeah.
See, Apple doesn't invite me to these things, even though I live like 3 blocks away, or not really 3, but like 5 blocks away, maybe. And so, I'm like, okay, well, I'll just watch it online. It'll be great because it's.
I'm not invited yet either. It's
you're just preemptively. Okay.
Just you got a refundable hotel room. They book up. I've been there.
Yeah, no, for sure. For me, it's a non-issue because if I was invited ever, I'm just staying at home. So, so anyway, that's good news. We have a date now. We have a date for I/O from a few weeks ago. Now we have a date for this, so we're all set for the rest of the year. The only thing we need to worry about is Computex, and hopefully I get to go. I've put my feelers out about getting a sponsorship to go to Taipei again. It's the first time back since COVID, so I'm looking forward to it. The next item here on the news list is Snapdragon, another Snapdragon. Last week, we got the 8S Gen 3, which was like the detuned flagship processor. Now we're getting a kind of high-end mid-range processor with the 7 Plus Gen 1. Their naming convention. Ray and I had a little rant about this last week. What do you think? Like, it doesn't make... I don't... Like this, they added S. They had the Plus. Now they're making it complicated, like, by adding S. And now this... Oh, doesn't matter. Like, I don't think there is a... I don't think there was a 7, like there's a 7 Gen 2 didn't exist. It was 7 Plus Gen 2. And then they went to 7 Gen 3 and now there's 7 Plus Gen 3. It doesn't make sense. It's not consistent. Qualcomm, do it right.
No, thank you. This is like the same thing with also TVs. It's like the number of letters and numbers that they try to cram in there. It does no service. Luckily, most people, the average consumer isn't getting too caught up with these, but it definitely makes our job quite difficult. what's really the story with it though? Are we talking about like
it's kind of hard to tell because like there are so like, you know, it's definitely not an 8 series. Like it's definitely detuned from that quite a bit. The 8S Gen 3 is really just like 8 Gen 2 GPU, right? With 8 Gen 3 modified CPU and a bunch of AI stuff. And it's basically just a slightly detuned version. This is much more like they've cut more features here, but it's also going to be much more affordable. The big news is it has Wi-Fi 7, which is cool.
That's cool.
I think it's one of the first mid-range chips from Qualcomm with Wi-Fi 7. And yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely an upgrade over the previous, which was 7 Plus Gen 2. And it's going to benefit the mid-range phones. In fact, I would like to say that we already have a phone announced in China, which is a OnePlus phone with this chipset. It's called the OnePlus Ace 3V. That's basically, you know, gonna be coming to the West probably as the OnePlus Nord CE4. So I'll put a bunch of links, but the A series is China only for OnePlus, and it's always comes out as a Nord for us in the West. And so the Nord CE4, CE stands for like European Union, and the N stands for North America. So we're gonna get a Nord N40 out of this. Like, I can mark my words. This phone is the Ace in China, coming out soon, like it's officially out in China with the Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 3. It's then going to come to Europe as this CE, 3 here or whatever it is, and then it's going to come to the US market probably on Timo or something as the Nord N40. That's basically what's the story here, and that's why it's interesting.
So the Nord CE4 is launching April 1st.
Yes,
so that means we could get it in North America, maybe around summer.
Well, I think they're sometime in this, usually sometime in like April, May, June that we get the Nord N series equivalent. So it's like a month. They're going to be a month, spaced out a month apart roughly. I wouldn't be surprised if it's May before we see the Nord. There are no rumors on the Nord for the US yet, but it's based on past experience. It's inevitable.
Yeah. It's a nice phone too, usually.
Yeah, and so you look at the specs. It's actually pretty cool. Like it's got a 120 hertz AMOLED, which is nice because the last Nord, the N30 for us, was whatever Ace last year, Ace 2 or something. It had like just an LCD at 120 hertz. The year before, it had an OLED at 60 hertz. So I was very excited the year before because I'm like, I'd rather give up on the refresh rate and get an OLED than get an LCD at 120. And so this is, again, going back to OLED at 120. And again, we're talking about a $250, $275 phone here, right? Then you look at the rest of the specs and, it's nice. It's got a 50 megapixel camera with OIS. Apparently, it's a Lydia sensor, one of the newer, higher end Sony sensors. So I'm sure the wide angle camera, the ultra wide, will be potato like 8 megapixel nothingness. But they're gonna probably give us a decent camera on the main. And then of course, fast charging, big battery, 5,500 milliamp hour. There's never a OnePlus phone that comes out with less than 30 watt charging. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a 60 or even better than that. So. 100 watt. Look at that, 100 watt. I was right. So, look, I don't think we're getting a 100 watt version. We always get like 80 watt or 67 watt or something when it comes to North America because they're saving a bit of money that way. But, it's nice that they launched a chip and it's immediately available on a phone and that it's a phone that eventually will trickle down to us. That's basically the takeaway here.
Cool.
The other thing is last week, Ray and I talked about this because there was a rumor that the folding phone from Vivo, also BBK Group, so basically the OnePlus Open equivalent from Vivo, but for 2024, because Open is a 23 phone, is out officially now, right? So that's an interesting one because it's kind of marrying some of the features from the Open, and then it's got a Pro version, which is like super high end, and then it's got a regular. So it's a Vivo X Fold 3 and Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. So it's the first folding phone with 8 Gen 3 so far, and it's got a lot of the same cameras as the Open, and a lot of the same specs otherwise. But then the regular non-Pro has an 8 Gen 2, and it is lighter. It's the lightest folding phone. So the thinnest is still the Honor Magic V2, but the lightest is now this Vivo X Fold 3 non-Pro, and it's, get this, Kate, lighter than an iPhone 15 or 15 Pro, and lighter than a Galaxy S23.
Wow. Wait,
Ultra
so you're
or
saying
Plus.
that it's a 0.4-inch profile. You're saying there's a phone that's thinner than that, a foldable?
So there is a foldable from Honor, the Magic V2, that is the same thickness as an iPhone 15 Pro Max.
Oh, wow.
Closed.
So I know that the Pixel Fold 2, there's some leaks been out there about that, and we were thinking that could be like the thinnest foldable, but the specs that we've heard rumored have it actually as thicker than what
nobody has
Vivo's
managed
saying.
to beat Honor yet. They've come close. Xiaomi's gone very close prior to that. Xiaomi had the record prior to that. Both the OnePlus Open and the Pixel Original are pretty thin in the life. Like basically, Samsung's the loser here. They've had the thickest, and they haven't changed. And if they don't radically redesign the Z Fold 6 series, it's gonna be a bad day for them. But at least for us media ranting, because I'm sure they're going to sell more than everyone else. But that goes without saying. But the bottom line is competition is heating up. We're never going to get the Vivo in North America. So, or even in Europe, this might stay. Some of these models might stay China only, and they just launched in China. So hold on for global models. They always come out a little later. The reality, though, is progress is being made on weight and on the thickness, and I wouldn't be surprised, and that's what Honor's been saying since they launched the Magic V2 last summer at IFA, which is still the thinnest phone after all this time, is that their goal is to make it indistinguishable for a person to use a folding phone versus a bar phone. So we'll see. But it's exciting to me because, look, I don't have a Honor Magic V2, but I've played with it, I've touched it, and let me tell you, Kate, it's uncanny when you touch a phone that thin. Like you're like, it folds, and then you open it up, and it's barely thicker than the USB-C port.
I need to check that out.
A bunch of our friends in New York have one. Just ping the crew. I do not have one because Honor has limited quantities of units, and I'm a small publication, so I've been begging, but I still don't have one. Plus, I'm sure they're going to come out with a Magic V3, which will possibly be thinner. We'll see.
Oh, true.
Anyway, so that's one thing that happened. The next thing on the list is some leaks of the Google Pixel 9, not 9 Pro, 9. What are your thoughts on these renders? They're renders. I kind of dig the industrial light.
I love it.
It's a bit more iPhone-like. Maybe that's the part I'm annoyed with, but other than that, I think it's pretty solid.
The edges do look kind of iPhone-like, but yeah. I think that
that camera pod is hot, man.
I love the camera bump. It looks so modern.
It looks so fresh.
It'll look so good with a case. And I think the Pixel line's just due for a refresh. It's kind of looked the same the last 2-3 years. It's time.
Yeah, I agree. I'm look, this is, rumors right now, so just hang tight. We're very close to I/O, and we'll definitely get a Pixel Fold there, and probably a Pixel 8a. And the design language will be telling, because if you've seen the camera bump on the original Pixel, that's the design.
Yep.
Right? So this is hot. I mean, I'm an 8 Pro user as my main phone. And, as I said to Ray last week, if Google can give us, the same kind of form factor as the Open, and improve on the processor. My biggest gripe always with the Pixels is the tensor chips. If they can get slightly better battery life, slightly better performance on the radios, I will switch to a folding phone as my main phone. I have a OnePlus Open in my pockets at all time as my second phone right now, because I'm switching back and forth. I can't give up all the cool calling features on the Pixel, the call screening and stuff. That's why I'm still on Pixel, because the camera on the OnePlus is incredible. The user experience on this folding phone is incredible. So if Google can give us something close to that, that's it. I only have to carry one phone. I mean, that will never happen because I always have a review unit or two on me anyway. But, at least technically, I only have to carry one phone. Right now, I feel like I have to two.
We're actually going to get probably an official render from, don't they always tease the hardware?
They will tease us. Yeah,
so we're going to see a render at I/O of whatever is coming in October, whenever they do their next true made by event. That'll be exciting.
Yeah, a couple of more PSAs. They're just basically letting you folks know if you have a Galaxy S23 or Z Fold 5, Z Flip 5, the Samsung AI features that we saw on the S24 series at launch are basically coming to these older phones. So they're not that old, and don't feel bad if you have one. Hang on to it. It's not worth upgrading, especially now that you're getting Samsung AI features, right?
That didn't even take that long.
Yeah, it didn't take long at all. It's kind of like when we got Magic Eraser on the older Pixels, and actually on every other Android phone if you subscribe to Google One. It's like, hey, why did you make me buy a Pixel for this feature? Now you're giving it to everyone. But honestly, I support that because I don't want the exclusivity stuff. I think it sucks.
Especially if the phones have the hardware and the chips that can handle it. Like,
yeah, for sure. Nothing Phone 2a has a major camera update. I just received it, but basically, I am telling you this because it's an improvement. So that was my biggest gripe with that phone. It's really solid in every way for the money in particular, but the camera was needing some tuning, and it's definitely much better. So it's still, a $350 phone. So just don't expect flagship levels of performance out of it. The only Achilles heel on that camera is zooming. I would go up to 3x, you're good. Beyond that, forget it. But everything else, low light, detail, consistency, colors. The sensor's a little dynamic range compromised, but honestly, at that price, I'm not going to be complaining about it. So this update really helps. The last thing on the plate here, and I want your thoughts on this. Have you played or seen the Nubia Z60 Ultra?
I haven't, but seen, yes, not in person.
Right.
I just watched an unboxing of it, though.
You're familiar with the Red Magic phones, right? The gaming phones. So Nubia and Red Magic are the same brand. They're owned by ZTE.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're sub-brand of each other. But what I'm saying is that they're basically like the chassis and the display and they share a lot of the same guts. One is being turned into a gaming phone by adding a fan in it. And then the other one, they bumped the camera features up a notch to give you a flagship. And that's why I think the Z60 Ultra is so interesting, is because, you're getting this really crazy, almost bezel-less, completely rectangular display. And also, get this, the main camera is not 25 or 28 millimeters. It's 35 millimeters. So it's it's like being zoomed at 1.5x all the time.
It's great.
And so I love that because I take almost all my photos at 2x. Right? I love just having a cropped in look for portraits and stuff. And I don't take a lot of pictures of people, but even then I'd like to be 2x. So for me, having an ultra wide that stretches a little more beyond 1x, that goes up to 1.5, and then having the main camera being 1.5, and then having the, a telephoto at 3x or something or beyond makes a lot of sense. And if I have to give one bit of credit to Nubia is this. The software on the Red Magic and the Nubia phones is always very iffy, and the updates don't happen. The hardware, though, is always great, and they're really affordable, and they're available in North America with US bands unlocked. So, the software thing is a problem. Half of it is badly translated. It's kind of an experience. So now
it's so hot. It looks so cool.
So now we're getting a photography edition. Apparently, they're probably China only. With a bunch, basically, it's the same hardware, a slightly redesigned camera bump in the back, with more importantly, some additional AI features. Who knows? I just thought it was interesting because I'm a bit of a camera nut, so I haven't gotten one yet. I have a Red Magic 9 Pro coming, which is like the gaming phone, doesn't have the same cameras though.
Mm-hmm.
See if I can get myself a Nubia Z60 Ultra. Probably not that photography edition though. So
you got to be into it. Like you have to, if you're getting that, it has to, the design and that like nostalgic camera look has to call to you. I've been testing out the new Fujifilm Instax Mini 99 instant camera, and it kind of has that same like look. It's very much like you're buying it for the aesthetic. It has that like textured black leather, the vegan leather actually.
Yeah.
So,
no, I also, be honest with you, I have a big thing for perfectly square phones. Like the Note series, right? Until, well, now that it's got a flat screen, it's even more square. Yeah. So like the Galaxy, the Ultra, I should say, the S series Ultra now, and it used to be Note. And this Red Magic, like, or Nubia. The Red Magic, by the way, it's a perfect monolith. It doesn't even have camera bump. So like, you pick it up and it's just like, the monolith in a Space Odyssey, right? Like it's like that as a phone. And then you look at the front, there's no bezel and the camera is under the display and it just looks like the phone of the future. It like, it looks like you're in like Westworld holding one of those phone tablets things they have, It's kind of magical. So I dig it. I don't recommend these devices if you are not an adventurous early adopter tech savvy folks, because the software on these it's not buggy usually, but it needs polish. And more importantly, you're never going to get any upgrades. Like you might get security updates from the first 6 months. And then, they're basically not interested in long-term support with these phones. So keep that in mind if you're planning, because the pricing is really solid. That's Nubia Z60 Ultra, I think, is $850.
Wow.
I mean,
that's a lot of money for something that's not.
It's a lot of money, but if you look at the tech, it's a lot of tech. And it competes nicely with an S24 Ultra, which costs, $1299 or whatever, right? So, but then the software, you can't get it all. You can't get it all.
No.
Yeah. No, I think if you're like, more into like, I want the latest, weirdest thing, I'm going to keep it 6 months. Yeah, that's great. Then put it on Swappa or something, right? Anyway, Kate, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet? Like all the things you do, your social media handles?
Yeah, I'm everywhere. Well, actually, my day job, I'm with tomsguide.com,
That's
but
right.
I also run our YouTube channel there. We're at Tom's Guide US and other socials at Tom's Guide. Me personally, I do a lot of fun stuff too. On TikTok, I'm at Kate_Kozuck, Kozuch, and on Instagram and everywhere else, just at Kate Kozuch.
And you should definitely check out all the good stuff on Tom's Guide and the Instagram. I don't have TikTok because I'm old, but if you do have TikTok, you should definitely check out Kate's stuff because I've seen it. I've been shown, and I was like, oh. I think eventually I'm going to create a critical mass because like Christian DeLooper, Enobong, a bunch of other folks I know are doing TikToks, and I'm just going to have to install it just to watch the stuff.
It's super interesting. I love it.
It's fascinating to me for sure. I've had a few TikTok creators on the show before, and we've had a really good time. So listen, you know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankerl, TNKGRL on all the socials. That's like the comic book character Tankerl. Just drop all the vowels. That's on Twitter, on Blue Sky of all things. I don't know if I'm going to stay there, but on Threads. Threads is my big one, and then there's Facebook. There's Insta, of course. And so find me there. And the podcast itself is at mobiletechpodcast.com or on all the major podcasting apps. And please subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. If your app lets you review or rate the show, please consider doing that. And then there's a YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. Some unboxing videos there. I just posted an unboxing video of the OnePlus 12. I finally edited that. I got the phone in January. That should tell you something. But it's a nice video, so check it out. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment about the podcast, all that good stuff. But more importantly, Patreon, as I mentioned halfway through the podcast, you know this, I've had a Patreon for a few years, but I just changed the pricing. There's just basically one tier now. It's $5 a month, and it's the video version. And what it means is that you get to see us face to face, sometimes showing devices, like this crazy Oukitel phone, which is the size of a brick. Because, why not make a phone with a 22,000 milliamp hour battery? It is a battery pack with a phone attached to it. It's terrible. But now you get to see these kind of things on Patreon. So please support me if you can. $5 a month is awesome. And then if you just want to do a one-time thing, please consider a link in the show notes that you can click through to do a donation in PayPal. The Patreon lives at patreon.com/Tankerl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. So if you can, help me out. That'd be great. And of course, I want to thank our sponsor, Infineon. Infineon is a global semiconductor leader in power systems and IoT and drives decarbonization and digitalization with its products and solutions. Learn more at the link in the show notes. And then I want to thank you, Kate, for being my guest this week. It was awesome to have you on.
Oh, it was so great. I'll come back anytime.
Great. Let's do that. And folks, you know I'll have another show next week. So please stay tuned. And until then, cheers, everybody.